The stars looked different when you owned 10,000 worlds. Admiral Crixvell stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the pale blue dot grow larger on the view screen. His scales shifted from deep purple to bright orange, a sign of excitement among his people. After 300 years of service to the Zeralian Empire, he had found another primitive world to add to their collection. "Report," he commanded, his voice echoing through the command center. "Single inhabited planet, Admiral," replied his aide. "They call it Earth. Population roughly 8 billion. Technology level appears primitive. They have achieved basic spaceflight but remain confined to their local system." Crixvell clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. Another easy conquest. The Empire needed more slave worlds, and these humans would serve well. Their preliminary scans showed the species was physically capable and seemed to adapt well to different environments. "Any military presence?" he asked. "Minimal, sir. We detect approximately 50 vessels in the outer system. Most appear to be commercial or research ships. No significant weapon signatures." The Admiral laughed, a sound like grinding metal. 50 ships against his third fleet of 500. This would be over before it began. Light years away, Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the UES Liberty, sipping coffee from his favorite mug. The mug had a picture of his dog on it and the words "World's Best Dad." His daughter had given it to him for his birthday 3 months ago. "Contact on long-range sensors." "Captain," announced Lieutenant Amy Brooks from the tactical station. She was young, maybe 25, with bright red hair tied back in a regulation ponytail. Large formation approaching from the edge of the system. Morrison set down his mug and stretched. He had been hoping for a quiet patrol. The Liberty was part of the Solar Defense Corps, essentially the space equivalent of a Coast Guard. They spent most of their time helping stranded miners and checking cargo manifests. "How large?" he asked. 500 ships, sir. Unknown configuration. They're broadcasting something." Commander Ryan Parker looked up from his communications console. Parker was the ship's diplomatic officer, a job that mostly involved talking to angry asteroid prospectors and lost tourists. "They're demanding we surrender, Captain, threatening to destroy all human civilization if we refuse." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "That seems excessive. What did we do to them?" "Exist, apparently," Parker replied with a shrug. The captain stood up and straightened his uniform. It was the standard Solar Defense Corps blue, with patches indicating his rank and years of service. "Nothing fancy." "Well, I suppose we should go talk to them." Brooks signaled the rest of the patrol. "Tell them we might have a situation." "Already on it, sir. 49 other ships are responding. Most of them are asking if this means they have to cancel their weekend leave." Morrison smiled. The Solar Defense Corps was not known for its military discipline. Most of the crew were part-time volunteers or recent academy graduates getting their first taste of space duty. The Liberty itself was a training vessel, used to teach new officers how to operate in zero gravity. 20 minutes later, the human and alien fleets faced each other in the space near Jupiter's largest moon. The contrast was stark. The Zeralian ships were massive, dark things covered in weapons and armor plating. They looked like they had been built for war and nothing else. The human ships were smaller, cleaner, with smooth lines and bright paint jobs. Several of them had names like Summer Breeze and Happy Wanderer. Admiral Crixvell opened a communication channel to the human fleet. His image appeared on the Liberty's main screen, all scales and teeth and glowing eyes. "Primitive humans," he began, his voice full of authority. "I am Admiral Crixvell of the Zeralian Empire. You will surrender immediately and prepare to become subjects of our glorious civilization. Resist, and we will turn your pathetic world into ash." Captain Morrison appeared on the alien ship's screen in return. He looked completely relaxed, still holding his coffee mug. Behind him, the Liberty's bridge looked more like an office than a military command center. There were potted plants on some of the consoles. "Hi there," Morrison said pleasantly. "I'm Captain Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. Thanks for the offer, but we'll have to pass on the whole surrender thing. Nothing personal." Crixvell's scales shifted to red, indicating anger. "You dare refuse the Empire? What military force do you think you can bring against us?" Morrison glanced around his bridge. Lieutenant Brooks was painting her nails. Commander Parker was reading what looked like a romance novel. The helmsman was doing a crossword puzzle. "Oh, we've got about 50 ships out here right now," Morrison said. "Should be enough." The Admiral stared at him in disbelief. 50 ships? Against 500? Well, we don't want to make this unfair, Morrison replied with a grin. Crixvel cut the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. Destroy them all. Show these humans what happens when they defy the Empire. The Zeralian fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and missiles filled the space between the two forces. The humans scattered, their ships moving with surprising speed and agility. What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The human ships, despite being outnumbered 10-1, began systematically destroying the Zeralian fleet. Their weapons were more accurate, their shields stronger, their tactics superior. More importantly, they fought with a casual efficiency that terrified their enemies. Lieutenant Brooks, still working on her nails, called out targeting solutions between coats of polish. Commander Parker bookmarked his page and began coordinating with other ships, treating the battle like a training exercise. Captain Morrison continued drinking his coffee, occasionally giving orders in the same tone he might use to ask someone to pass the salt. Liberty to all ships, he announced over the fleet channel. Remember, we want to keep some of them alive for questioning. And please try not to damage any of their escape pods. These people might have useful information. The battle lasted exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes. When it was over, only 12 Zeralian ships remained intact and most of those were damaged. Admiral Crixvel found himself staring at a debris field that had once been the pride of the Empire's military. How? He whispered to his surviving crew. How is this possible? His communications officer, bleeding from a head wound, looked up from her station. Admiral, we're receiving a message from the humans. Captain Morrison appeared on screen again, looking slightly apologetic. Sorry about the mess out there. We'll have cleanup crews out shortly to help with survivors. Just so you know, we've sent a report back to Earth about this encounter. They'll probably want to have a diplomatic chat with your people. Crixvel could barely speak. What? What are you? Morrison looked confused by the question. We're the Solar Defense Corps, sir. Local patrol unit. We handle minor security issues in the outer system. He paused, though I guess this wasn't very minor for you folks. The transmission ended, leaving the Admiral staring at a blank screen. Local patrol unit, minor security issues. The humans had just destroyed the Empire's Third Fleet with what amounted to their Coast Guard. As the surviving Zeralian ships limped away toward home, Admiral Crixvel began composing his report to the Supreme Chancellor. He knew no one would believe it. He barely believed it himself. Behind them, the human ships were already returning to their normal duties. Several were heading off to investigate a distress call from a cargo hauler. Others were resuming their regular patrol routes. Captain Morrison finished his coffee and set the empty mug aside. Brooks, remind me to call my daughter when we get back to base. I promised to help her with her science project. What's the project about, Captain? Morrison smiled. Ancient Earth history. Something about old wars. Supreme Chancellor Vex Thran had ruled the Zeralian Empire for over 2 centuries. In all that time, he had never received a report like the one sitting on his desk. He read it 3 times before calling for Admiral Crixvel to appear before the War Council. The Admiral stood at attention in the great chamber, his scales a dull gray color indicating shame and fear. Around him, the council members whispered among themselves, their voices creating a low buzz that filled the room. Explain to me again, the Chancellor said slowly, how you lost 488 ships to 50 human vessels. Crixvel swallowed hard. Their technology is far beyond what our scouts reported, Supreme Chancellor. Their weapons cut through our shields like they were made of paper. Their ships moved faster than anything we've seen. And their tactics? He paused, remembering the casual way the humans had fought, like they were swatting insects instead of fighting for their lives. Their tactics what, Admiral? They treated it like a training exercise, sir. We intercepted their communications. They were joking during the battle, making plans for their weekend leave. One of their officers was doing her nails while calling out firing solutions. The War Council erupted in angry chatter. Several members accused the Admiral of cowardice, of making excuses for his failure. Chancellor Vex Thran raised a hand for silence. You are certain of this intelligence? Yes, sir. I have the recordings. The Chancellor leaned back in his throne, thinking. The Empire had conquered thousands of worlds over the millennia. They had faced fierce resistance before, desperate last stands, heroic sacrifices, but never anything like this. Never an enemy that fought with such casual confidence. Very well, he said finally. Admiral Morketh, you will take the Second Fleet to this human world. 5,000 ships should be sufficient to crush their resistance. Admiral Morketh, a younger officer with bright blue scales, saluted smartly. It will be an honor, Chancellor. These humans will learn what happens when they humiliate the Empire. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter sat in the Oval Office reviewing the morning briefings. The alien encounter was mentioned in a single paragraph on page 12, filed under minor security. Incidents. She barely glanced at it before, moving on to more pressing matters like the new trade agreement with the Mars colonies. General Kevin Roberts knocked on her door an hour later. He was a calm man in his 60s with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been in charge of Earth's defense forces for 10 years and took pride in running a quiet, efficient organization. Madam President, we need to discuss the alien contact situation. She looked up from her paperwork. The patrol ships handled it, right? I read they sent the survivors home with a warning. Yes, ma'am, but our intelligence suggests they might try again with a larger force. Captain Morrison's report indicates they have significant military resources. President Carter nodded. What do you recommend? I'd like to rotate in some of our reserve units. Maybe deploy the 3rd Solar Defense Wing. They've been complaining about not getting enough field training lately. Approved. Just make sure it doesn't interfere with the Mars shipping lanes. The colonists get upset when their supply runs are delayed. General Roberts smiled. Of course, ma'am. The reserve units are very professional. They know how to handle these situations without disrupting civilian traffic. 3 weeks later, Admiral Morketh arrived at the edge of the solar system with the full might of the Second Fleet. 5,000 ships spread out in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready for battle. He had studied every available recording of the previous encounter, analyzing human tactics and technology. The humans were waiting for them. 53 ships this time, arranged in a loose defensive formation near the asteroid belt. Morketh recognized the human ship configuration from the previous battle reports. Small, fast vessels with unusual weapon signatures. Commander Sarah Mitchell sat in the captain's chair of the UES Defiance, reviewing the tactical display. Like Captain Morrison, she was part of the Solar Defense Corps, though she commanded one of their newer training squadrons. Most of her crew were recent Academy graduates on their first deep space assignment. That's a lot of ships, commented Captain Tony Rodriguez from the escort vessel UES Guardian. His voice came through clearly on the communications channel. More targets for practice, replied Major Karen Walsh from the UES Defender. The new cadets need experience with multiple target engagement, Mitchell smiled. The reserve units were always eager for realistic training scenarios. After years of routine patrol duty and simulation exercises, a chance to test their skills against actual opponents was welcome. Admiral Morketh opened a communication channel to the human fleet. His image appeared on the screens of all 53 human ships simultaneously. Humans, he announced in his most intimidating voice. I am Admiral Morketh of the Imperial Second Fleet. You have humiliated our forces and threatened the peace of the galaxy. Surrender now or face complete annihilation. Commander Mitchell appeared on his screen in response. She was a woman in her 30s with short brown hair and a friendly smile. Behind her, the bridge of the Defiance looked like a college classroom. Several young officers were taking notes on tablets, apparently using the encounter as a learning experience. Good morning, Admiral, she said politely. I'm Commander Mitchell of the Solar Defense Corps. I'm afraid we can't surrender, but we appreciate you coming all this way. My students have been looking forward to a practical training exercise. Students. The word hit Morketh like a physical blow. These weren't even regular military units. They were training ships with student crews. You dare mock the Empire? He snarled. Mitchell looked genuinely confused. Mock? No, sir. We take our training very seriously. In fact, this will be an excellent opportunity for my cadets to practice fleet coordination under real combat conditions. The Admiral cut the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. Begin the attack. Destroy them all. The battle that followed lasted 6 hours. It was longer than the previous encounter, partly because the human commanders kept stopping to give instructions to their student crews. Commander Mitchell could be heard over the communication channels explaining proper defensive formations, while her ship destroyed an entire Zeralian squadron. Captain Rodriguez paused in the middle of a missile barrage to correct a cadet's targeting calculations. The humans fought with the same casual efficiency that had terrified Admiral Crixvell. But this time there was an educational component. They used the battle as a teaching moment, demonstrating advanced tactics and weapon systems to their young crews. Notice how their heavy cruisers always grouped together. Major Walsh explained to her cadets as she maneuvered around a cluster of enemy ships. That makes them vulnerable to area effect weapons. Watch this. Her ship fired a single torpedo that somehow managed to disable 6 Zeralian vessels simultaneously. The cadets took careful notes. Admiral Morketh watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed by what amounted to a floating classroom. The humans weren't just defeating them. They were using the Empire's finest warships as training aids. When it was over, fewer than 300 of his 5,000 ships remained operational. The Admiral found himself alone on his bridge, most of his crew either dead or unconscious. His communications officer, a young female with bright green scales, looked up from her damaged console. "Admiral, the humans are hailing us." Commander Mitchell appeared on screen again, still looking pleasant and professional. "Excellent work out there, Admiral. My students learned a great deal from this exercise. We're transmitting medical assistance coordinates for your survivors." "How?" Morketh whispered. "How are you so powerful with so few ships?" Mitchell tilted her head thoughtfully. "I'm not sure I understand the question, sir. We're just a training squadron. Most of these ships aren't even fully equipped for combat operations." She paused, "Though I suppose our cadets are quite talented. The Solar Defense Corps has very high admission standards." The transmission ended, leaving the Admiral staring at the wreckage of his fleet. Training squadron, cadets, high admission standards. As the surviving ships began their long journey back to Empire space, Morketh tried to compose his report to the Chancellor. How could he explain that the Empire's second fleet had been destroyed by a group of students? Back on Earth, Commander Mitchell filed her routine training report. Under the section marked Notable Events, she wrote, "Encountered foreign vessels during navigation exercise. Used opportunity for practical training in fleet coordination and target identification. All learning objectives successfully completed. Recommend similar exercises in future." The report was filed in the usual bureaucratic channels and forgotten within a week. After all, training missions were routine business for the Solar Defense Corps, nothing worth bothering the politicians about. The emergency session of the War Council lasted 18 hours. Supreme Chancellor Vex Thran sat in his throne, reading Admiral Morketh's report for the 5th time. Around him, the greatest military minds of the Empire argued and shouted, their scales shifting through every color of rage and fear. "It's impossible," declared General Zixmordal, commander of the Empire's ground forces. "No species can destroy our fleets with such ease. These reports must be exaggerated." Admiral Morketh, still recovering from his wounds, struggled to stand. "I was there, General. I saw our ships cut apart like toys. The humans fight like nothing we've ever encountered." "Training exercises," spat Commander Vel Thuros of Intelligence. "You're telling us that students destroyed the Second Fleet during a training exercise?" "I know how it sounds," Morketh replied weakly. "But I have the recordings. They were teaching their young ones how to fight while they killed us." Chancellor Vex Thran raised his hand for silence. The chamber fell quiet, waiting for his decision. He had built the Empire through careful planning and overwhelming force. Every world that had resisted them had eventually fallen. But these humans were different. They didn't fight with desperation or fury. They fought with confidence, like beings who had never known defeat. "Grand Admiral Zon Krax," he said finally. The eldest military officer in the Empire stepped forward. Zon Krax was ancient even by Zeralian standards, his scales faded to silver with age. He had commanded fleets when the Empire was young, had conquered more worlds than any other living being. "Yes, Chancellor. Take the First Fleet, all 50,000 ships. End this threat before it spreads." The Grand Admiral bowed deeply. "It will be done, Chancellor. Though I wonder, perhaps we should attempt diplomacy first." The chamber erupted in angry protests. Several younger officers accused Zon Krax of cowardice, of dishonoring the Empire's military traditions. But the old admiral had seen too many wars to care about pride. "You mistake wisdom for cowardice," he said quietly. "Any species that can destroy our fleets with training ships deserves our respect, not our arrogance." But the Chancellor had made his decision. 50,000 ships, Grand Admiral. Bring me the humans in chains or don't come back at all." On Earth, the media had finally begun to notice the alien incidents. The evening news led with a story about mysterious battles in the outer system. interviewing several asteroid miners who claimed to have seen massive explosions near Jupiter. President Carter held a press conference to address the public's concerns. She stood at the podium in her usual calm manner, flanked by General Roberts and Secretary of Defense Laura Bennett. "My fellow Americans," she began, "and citizens of Earth, I want to assure you that the recent encounters with extraterrestrial forces have been handled professionally by our defense services. There is no threat to Earth or our colonies." A reporter raised her hand. "Madam President, sources suggest these aliens have attacked us twice with large fleets. How are we defending against such numbers?" General Roberts stepped forward. "I can address that. We've rotated some of our reserve units into the outer system as a precautionary measure. The Solar Defense Corps has been supplemented by elements of the Home Guard." Another reporter spoke up. "General, what kind of forces are we talking about? How many ships do we have?" "I can't give specific numbers for security reasons," Roberts replied. "But I can say our Home Guard units are more than adequate for the current threat level. These are well-trained, professional forces equipped with the latest technology." What neither the reporters nor the general public knew was that the Home Guard was Earth's equivalent of a National Guard unit. Weekend warriors and part-time soldiers who trained once a month and spent most of their time helping with natural disasters and crowd control at sporting events. Captain Danny Clark read the news reports from his cabin aboard the UES Sovereign. As commander of the 3rd Home Guard Squadron, he was about to lead 200 ships in what the media was calling the defense of Earth. He found the whole thing mildly amusing. Clark was a 40-year-old engineer who had joined the Home Guard to help pay for his daughter's college education. Most of his crew were similar volunteers, teachers, mechanics, office workers who served part-time to supplement their regular incomes. They were good people, but hardly the elite military force the news reports made them sound like. "Captain," called Commodore Rachel Price from the communication station, "we're getting reports of a large alien fleet approaching the system." 50,000 ships. Clark set down his newspaper and stretched. 50,000? That's quite a few more than last time. "Should we call for reinforcements, sir?" asked Captain Mike Thompson from the nearby UES Patriot. "Nah," Clark replied. 200 ships should be enough. Besides, the regular military is busy with that situation near Alpha Centauri. Something about space pirates. The truth was that Earth's actual military forces were spread across dozens of star systems, maintaining peace and protecting trade routes throughout human space. The encounters with the Zeralians were considered minor border incidents, hardly worth recalling the real fleet. 3 days later, Grand Admiral Zon Krax arrived with the full might of the Empire's First Fleet. 50,000 warships darkened the space around Saturn, their weapons charged and ready. The Grand Admiral had deployed his forces in the classic battle formation that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Facing them were 200 human ships arranged in a loose defensive perimeter. To Zon Krax's experienced eye, they looked no different from the previous human forces. Small, clean vessels with similar weapon signatures and shield configurations. But the Grand Admiral had not lived for 3 centuries by underestimating his enemies. He opened communications with the human fleet, hoping to learn something that might give him an advantage. Admiral Clark appeared on his screen, looking like he had just woken up from a nap. Behind him, the bridge of the Sovereign looked comfortable and informal. Several crew members were eating sandwiches at their stations. "Good afternoon," Clark said pleasantly. "I'm Admiral Clark of the Earth Defense Forces. Nice fleet you've got there. Must have taken a while to organize." Zon Krax studied the human carefully. Unlike the previous commanders, this one held the rank of admiral, suggesting he might be facing their actual military leadership finally. "I am Grand Admiral Zon Krax of the Imperial First Fleet," he announced formally. "You have humiliated our forces and defied our authority. This ends today." Clark nodded thoughtfully. "I understand your frustration, but I'm afraid we can't let you attack Earth. It's sort of our job to prevent that kind of thing." "Your job?" the Grand Admiral asked. "Home Guard," Clark explained. "We handle domestic security issues, though I guess this counts as domestic since you're in our solar system." Home Guard. The term meant nothing to Zon Krax, but the casual way Clark said it worried him. Was this another layer of human military forces? How many different units did these people have? The battle began at dawn on Earth time. Zon Krax deployed his forces in waves, testing human responses and looking for weaknesses. What he found instead was a level of tactical coordination that defied explanation. The human ships moved like a single organism, supporting each other with perfect timing. Their weapons fire was precise and devastating, each shot carefully calculated for maximum effect. Most disturbing of all, they continued to treat the battle like a routine training exercise. "Sovereign to all units," Admiral Clark announced over the fleet channel. "Remember to conserve ammunition. We don't want to run short before the next supply delivery." "Copy that, Admiral," replied Commodore Price from the UES Liberty Bell. "Should we activate the emergency protocols?" "Not yet," Clark said thoughtfully. "Let's see how they handle standard defensive patterns first." Standard defensive patterns. The Grand Admiral felt a chill run through his ancient bones. These humans were fighting the Empire's greatest fleet with standard tactics, treating it as a routine engagement. The battle raged for 18 hours. Slowly, methodically, the human forces dismantled the Imperial First Fleet. They showed no mercy but also no hatred. They fought with the calm efficiency of professionals doing their job. As his flagship began to break apart around him, Grand Admiral Zonkrax opened one final communication channel to the human fleet. "How?" he asked. "How can you field such power with so few ships?" Admiral Clark appeared on screen one last time. Behind him, his crew was already beginning post-battle cleanup procedures. "Power?" Clark looked confused. "Sir, these are just heavy reconnaissance units. We're home guard, not frontline military. If you wanted a real fight, you should have threatened our colonies or something." The transmission cut out as the Grand Admiral's ship exploded. In his final moments, Zonkrax understood the horrible truth. 50,000 ships, the pride of the Empire's military, destroyed by what the humans considered domestic security forces. Back on Earth, President Carter held another press conference. "I'm pleased to announce that our home guard units have successfully resolved the alien threat. Thanks to their professionalism and dedication, Earth and our colonies remain safe." General Roberts nodded approvingly. The home guard performed admirably under pressure. Though given the scale of the threat, we may need to consider activating some regular military units if these incidents continue. Supreme Chancellor Vex Thrawn stood alone in his private chamber, staring out at the capital city of Zeralios Prime. For the first time in his long life, he faced the possibility of complete defeat. 3 fleets destroyed, his greatest admirals dead or broken, and still, he knew almost nothing about humanity's true capabilities. The reports from the survivors painted a picture that made no sense. Training ships defeating battle fleets, students destroying experienced warriors, home guard units obliterating the Empire's finest forces. Each encounter suggested the humans were barely trying, treating galactic warfare like a minor training exercise. A soft chime announced a visitor. Intelligence Commander Velthuros entered, his scales the dull brown color of exhaustion and fear. "Chancellor," he said quietly, "we have completed our analysis of the human communications intercepts." "And?" Velthuros set a data tablet on the Chancellor's desk. "The situation is worse than we thought." "Much worse." The Chancellor picked up the tablet and read in silence. According to intelligence estimates, the humans had been fighting the Empire with what amounted to local police forces. Their actual military remained completely unknown. "How is this possible?" he asked. "We believe we have been encountering different branches of their defense services," Velthuros explained. "First their patrol units, then training squadrons, then domestic security forces. Each one more capable than anything in our military. What about their regular army? Their main battle fleets? Unknown, Chancellor. We have found no evidence that they have deployed any frontline military units against us." The Chancellor closed his eyes and tried to imagine what humanity's real military might look like. If their Coast Guard could destroy Imperial fleets, what could their actual warships do? "Your recommendation?" he asked finally. "Immediate surrender," Velthuros replied without hesitation. "Full and unconditional, before they decide to take us seriously." On Earth, President Carter sat in an emergency cabinet meeting. The latest alien attack had been larger than expected, and the media was asking uncomfortable questions about Earth's defense capabilities. "The public wants answers," said Press Secretary William Hayes. "They're starting to wonder why these aliens keep attacking if we're so well defended." General Roberts rubbed his temples. "We can't tell them the truth. If people knew we've been fighting galactic invasions with part-time volunteers, there would be panic." Secretary of Defense Laura Bennett looked up from her briefing papers. Maybe it's time to activate some regular military units. Just to be safe. The president considered this carefully. Earth's actual military had not seen combat in over 2 centuries. They spent their time exploring new star systems, protecting trade routes, and maintaining peace between the various human colonies. Most citizens had no idea the military even existed beyond the local defense forces they saw in parades. "How many ships are we talking about?" she asked. "The Earth Defense Fleet maintains 50,000 active vessels," Bennett replied, "plus another 200,000 in ready reserve. The Colonial Marines have roughly 75,000 ships, and the Exploration Command operates about 30,000. Then there are the Special Forces divisions, but those numbers are classified." General Roberts nodded. "Any one of those branches could handle this alien threat easily. The question is whether we want to reveal their existence." "Let's try diplomacy first," Carter decided. "If these aliens want to talk, we'll listen. If not, we can always deploy the fleet later." 3 days later, Supreme Chancellor Vex Thrawn transmitted a direct message to Earth's government. It was the first time in the Empire's history that they had initiated peaceful contact with a species they had failed to conquer. President Carter received the call in the Oval Office, flanked by her top advisors. The alien leader appeared on the wall screen, his scales a subdued gray color that seemed to indicate respect or submission. "President Carter," he began formally, "I am Supreme Chancellor Vex Thrawn of the Zeralian Empire. I wish to discuss terms for ending hostilities between our peoples." Carter leaned forward slightly. "I'm listening, Chancellor. Though I should point out that we haven't been hostile. You've been attacking us." "Yes," Vex Thrawn admitted. "A grave error in judgment on our part. We underestimated your species and paid a terrible price. What exactly do you want from us?" The Chancellor hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Peace, President Carter. An end to this conflict before my people suffer further losses. We are prepared to offer tribute, territory, whatever compensation you require." General Roberts leaned over to whisper in the president's ear. "He's scared, ma'am. Really scared. Our intelligence suggests they think we're some kind of galactic superpower." Carter nodded and turned back to the screen. "Chancellor, we don't want your territory or your tribute. We just want to be left alone." "Of course," Vex Thrawn agreed quickly. "But perhaps we could discuss mutual defense agreements. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and your military capabilities are clearly superior to ours." Secretary Bennett raised an eyebrow. "He wants us to protect them." "I heard," Carter replied quietly. Then louder. "Chancellor, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The forces that engaged your fleets were not our main military. They were local defense units." The color drained from Vex Thrawn's scales, shifting to white with fear. "Local defense units?" "Coast Guard, essentially. And training squadrons. Home Guard volunteers. That sort of thing." The Chancellor gripped the arms of his throne. "Then what is your main military?" Carter glanced at her advisors, who nodded encouragingly. "Admiral Newman, would you like to take this question?" Admiral Patricia Newman stepped into view of the camera. She was a tall woman in her 50s, wearing the dark blue uniform of the Earth Defense Fleet. Her jacket displayed dozens of ribbons and medals, indicating decades of service across the galaxy. "Chancellor," she said professionally, "the Earth Defense Fleet currently maintains approximately 50,000 active warships, with another 200,000 in reserve status. This does not include Colonial Marine Forces, Exploration Command vessels, or our Special Operations divisions." Vex Thrawn stared at her in absolute silence. The numbers were incomprehensible. His entire empire possessed perhaps 20,000 ships total, and most of those were now destroyed or damaged. 200,000 ships, he whispered. "In reserve," Admiral Newman clarified. "Most of them haven't been activated in over a century. We've had very little need for large-scale military operations." "And the ships that fought us?" "Training vessels, mostly. Ships used to teach new officers basic space operations. The Home Guard units are weekend volunteers who help with disaster relief and crowd control." The Chancellor felt his world collapsing around him. The Empire's greatest military effort had been defeated by part-time volunteers using training equipment. The humans possessed military forces beyond his wildest imagination, and they had never bothered to use them. "What do you want from us?" he asked desperately. President Carter looked thoughtful. "Well, since you're asking, we could use someone to help maintain peace in this part of the galaxy. Our regular forces are busy exploring new territories, and frankly, dealing with your attacks has been disruptive to our shipping schedules." "You want us to maintain peace?" Why not? You know the local species understand the political situation. With proper oversight, the Zeralian Empire could serve as a stabilizing force in this region. General Roberts stepped forward. Of course, this would require significant changes to your government structure. Democratic reforms, civil rights protections, that sort of thing. We can provide advisors to help with the transition. Vexthron nodded eagerly. Yes, of course. Whatever you require. Admiral Newman smiled slightly. Don't worry, Chancellor. Most of the galaxy finds human oversight quite reasonable once they get used to it. We've helped dozens of species make the transition to peaceful coexistence. The negotiation continued for several hours, covering everything from governmental reforms to trade agreements. By the end, the Zeralian Empire had effectively become a client state of humanity, with Vexthran serving as a provincial governor under Earth's authority. As the transmission ended, President Carter turned to her advisors. That went better than expected. The intelligence reports suggest most of the galaxy doesn't even know we exist yet, Secretary Bennett observed. This could set a useful precedent for future first contact situations. General Roberts nodded. At least now we won't have to keep sending training units to deal with every minor threat. The Zeralians can handle local security issues. Admiral Newman looked amused. I should probably mention this to the Exploration Command. They've been complaining about having to detour around hostile territory. With the Empire as our ally, they can resume direct routes to the Outer Rim. President Carter signed the necessary orders to formalize the agreement. In a few short hours, humanity had acquired its first galactic protectorate without firing a shot from their actual military. One more thing, she said to Newman. Make sure word of this doesn't reach the Colonial Marines. They've been looking for an excuse to field test their new battle cruisers. The Admiral grinned. Of course, ma'am. Though I suspect they'll be disappointed they missed all the excitement. 6 months after the surrender of the Zeralian Empire, Admiral Jake Morrison found himself sitting in the captain's chair of the UES Endeavour, humanity's newest deep space exploration vessel. The ship was massive compared to his old patrol craft, with a crew of over 1,000 and enough firepower to level a small moon. Beside him, Lieutenant Amy Brooks had been promoted to commander and served as his executive officer. Commander Ryan Parker remained his diplomatic officer, though his job had become much more interesting since humanity's emergence onto the galactic stage. Contact on long-range sensors, Admiral, announced the tactical officer. A young man named Lieutenant Kevin Stone. Unknown vessel, approximately 50,000 kilometers off our starboard bow. Morrison set down his coffee mug, which still had his daughter's picture on it. Some things never changed even when you were exploring uncharted space in a ship that could single-handedly conquer most star systems. Any identification? Negative, sir. But they're broadcasting what appears to be a distress signal. Morrison stood and straightened his uniform. The new Admiral's insignia still felt strange on his collar. Put it on screen. The view screen showed a strange, crystalline ship that appeared to be badly damaged. Parts of its hull were cracked and leaking atmosphere, and several of its engine pods were dark. They're requesting assistance, reported Parker from the communications station. Their translator seems to be working. They call themselves the Vraxian Collective. Any relation to our Zeralian friends? Asked Brooks. Doesn't seem like it. Different technology base entirely. Morrison nodded. Open a channel. The screen flickered and revealed what looked like a living crystal formation. The being spoke in musical tones that the ship's computer translated into standard English. Unknown vessel, it said. I am Resonance of Hope of the Vraxian Collective. Our ship has suffered critical damage and we require assistance. Are you capable of rendering aid? This is Admiral Morrison of the Earth Exploration Command, he replied. We can help you with repairs. Do you need medical assistance for your crew? The crystalline being seemed to shimmer with what might have been relief. You are most kind. We have wounded among us, though I do not know if your medical techniques will be compatible with our physiology. We'll figure something out. Prepare to be taken aboard. An hour later, Resonance of Hope sat in the Endeavor's conference room, his crystal form refracting the room's lights into beautiful patterns. Around the table sat Morrison's senior staff, along with Dr. Lisa Chang, the ship's chief medical officer. Your ship is remarkable, the Vraxian observed. We detected it from quite a distance. Such power signatures are rare in this part of the galaxy. Morrison smiled. This is just an exploration vessel. We're not really equipped for combat. Resonance of Hope's form flickered with what their translator indicated was confusion. Not equipped for combat? But your weapon systems are more advanced than anything in collective records. Your shields could deflect the combined fire of a battle fleet. Commander Brooks leaned forward. What exactly are you comparing us to? The dominant power in this region was the Zeralian Empire, the Vraxian explained. Though recent reports suggest they have been pacified by an unknown force. Parker exchanged glances with Morrison. That would be us, actually. The crystalline being went very still. You defeated the Empire? Well, not exactly defeated, Morrison said carefully. More like we came to an understanding. They're working with us now on regional security issues. Impossible, Resonance of Hope whispered, his form glowing brighter. The Empire possessed 20,000 ships. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. It was a bit more complicated than that, Brooks said diplomatically. Dr. Chang looked up from her medical scanner. Admiral, I've finished examining their wounded. Their physiology is fascinating, but I think I can help them. Though I should mention, some of their injuries appear to be from energy weapons. Morrison frowned. What kind of energy weapons? Zeralian design, according to our database. Recent wounds, too. Resonance of Hope's glow dimmed with shame. We were fleeing when you found us. The Empire launched a final assault on our home system before their surrender. We barely escaped with our lives. The room fell silent. Morrison felt a familiar anger building in his chest. The same feeling he'd had when the Zeralians first threatened Earth. Commander Parker, he said quietly. Get me a direct line to former Chancellor Vex Thrawn immediately. 20 minutes later, Vex Thrawn appeared on the conference room's main screen. The Zeralian leader looked older and more tired than Morrison remembered, his scales a dull gray that indicated stress. Admiral Morrison, he said formally, how may I assist you? You can start by explaining why your forces attacked the Vraxian collective after your surrender to Earth. Vex Thrawn's scales shifted to blue with surprise. The attack on the collective was launched before our surrender. As soon as we signed the peace treaty, I ordered all military operations to cease. These people are refugees, Chancellor. Their home system was destroyed. Yes, Vex Thrawn said sadly, one of our final acts of aggression. A decision I deeply regret. Morrison studied the alien leader carefully. The surrender treaty had included provisions for war crimes tribunals, but most of the Empire's leadership had cooperated fully with the transition to democracy. Vex Thrawn himself had been remarkably helpful in establishing the new government structure. What can be done for them? Morrison asked. The collective homeworld is gone, Vex Thrawn admitted, but there are uninhabited systems within Empire space that could serve as a new home. With proper terraforming equipment, they could rebuild their civilization. Resonance of Hope's form brightened with hope. You would allow this? Under human supervision, yes, the Chancellor replied. It would be a way for the Empire to begin making amends for our past actions. Morrison nodded approvingly. Commander Brooks, contact the Exploration Command. Tell them we'll need a terraforming team and construction ships. Full priority. Yes, sir. After Vex Thrawn signed off, Resonance of Hope turned to Morrison with obvious amazement. You command such resources? Terraforming equipment, construction fleets? The Exploration Command has access to whatever we need, Morrison explained. Building new worlds is sort of what we do. And the Empire obeys your orders? They're our partners now. It's in everyone's interest to maintain peace and stability in this region. The Vraxian was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, may I ask about your people? Your capabilities seem extensive. Morrison exchanged glances with his officers. Word about humanity was spreading through the galaxy, but most species still had no idea about their true military capacity. We're explorers, he said simply. We prefer to build things rather than destroy them. But you defeated the Empire. That was handled by our local defense forces. Coast Guard units mostly? Coast Guard? Commander Parker leaned forward. Admiral, maybe we should give him the full picture. His people will be living under our protection now. Morrison considered this. The Vraxians seemed peaceful enough, and they would need to understand the political situation if they were going to resettle in human space. How much do you know about human military organization? He asked. Very little. Only that you somehow defeated the Empire's fleets. Brooks activated a holographic display showing the organizational structure of Earth's defense forces. These are our local defense units. They handle routine security in the Sol system. The display showed the Solar Defense Corps, with their 50 training ships and part-time crews. These defeated the Empire's Third Fleet, Morrison explained. Resonance of Hope studied the display carefully. 50 ships defeated 500? Next are our reserve units, Brooks continued, updating the display. The Home Guard handles domestic security issues. The new display showed 200 ships with volunteer crews. These defeated the Empire's remaining fleets? The Vraxian asked. The Second Fleet and the First Fleet, yes. Parker added the next layer to the display. These are our regular military forces. The Earth Defense Fleet, Colonial Marines, and Exploration Command. The display now showed over 300,000 ships spread across multiple commands. Resonance of Hope's crystal form began to pulse rapidly. This cannot be accurate. Actually, it's conservative, Morrison admitted. We're not showing the Special Operations Forces or the Deep Space Monitoring Stations. Those numbers are classified. The Vraxian sat in stunned silence, trying to process the implications. Your Coast Guard defeated the Empire. Your part-time volunteers destroyed their greatest fleets. And your actual military is mostly busy exploring new star systems, Morrison finished. We haven't had a real war in over 2 centuries. What happened to your enemies? We don't really have enemies, Brooks said. Most species find it easier to work with us than against us. The benefits of cooperation usually outweigh the costs of conflict. Dr. Chang looked up from her medical reports. Speaking of cooperation, I think we can help accelerate your people's healing process. Our medical technology should be compatible with your biology. Resonance of Hope's form brightened again. You would do this? For refugees you have just met? It's what we do, Morrison said with a smile. Besides, we're going to be neighbors. Might as well start off on the right foot. 3 months later, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the